Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I discuss career strategies. I talk with Tom Abdallah about mass transit, seizing opportunities, and teaching sustainability. And finally, oh dear, Nic, thanks. Cockroaches are not resistant to radiation, but could survive without their heads for a week. I'm sorry if you just ate something. So when you thought they couldn't get any weirder, there you go. Hit that music.
On January 26, 2022, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, NAEP will host its next great webinar titled An Environmental Planner's Guide to Recent Infrastructure Legislation, led by our very own Fred Wagner and Chuck Nicholson. This has been a big part of our show, so it's going to be a really great listen. Please register for the webinar at www.naep.org. Laura and I love doing the show. If you love it too, and would like us to keep doing it, we need your help. We can't do it without our awesome sponsors, so please head on over to www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and check out our sponsor form for details. Let's get to our segment.
Nic, so I had the interview with Tom, which you unfortunately were not able to make it to. Right. And he had so much good advice. So I was kind of it made me think, like, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh. There's, like I said, I've had my fair share. One of my favorites was that there's no such thing as life and death in NEPA, which was a way to tell me to, yes, you need to worry about it, but remember that it's not the end of the world. But I don't know. I think the one that kind of sticks with me all the time is very simple. It's just don't worry. And the context of that was trying to plan your career and work through where you're going to be. A lot of times where you are and where you're going to be have so many steps in front of you that you don't even know you're going to take, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's opportunities that fall into your lap. There's opportunities you find as you get to know people. There's opportunities that you just find through your standard doing your job. When a new project comes along and you meet somebody that you get along with really well, maybe that's your next, that becomes your next opportunity. It's one thing to plan and have an idea, and you should do that. But a lot of what happens with your career is not necessarily related to perfect planning. It's more of taking an opportunity and running with it. When you get that door open, go through it. And that's been really great advice for me. It's gotten me to where I am now. And I'm very, very happy with that. And I think that was much more impactful to me in my career than anything else. So that's probably the best advice I ever got. But
yeah, that's great. That relates really well to the things that Tom talked about.
Yeah.
I think you can tell from his career path and some of the examples that he'll talk about that's some advice he would also agree to.
That's good. Well, I mean, you're somebody who, you kind of give advice to people for a living. So you have to have like a couple of really good nuggets.
Yeah. And that's really kind of, I am in my book club. We just read Strategic Intuition, and it wasn't the greatest book in the world, but there were 2 chapters that were about strategy, like hard and heavy about strategy. And I was really into it. Yeah. And so I am always, I don't know if you want to call it preaching, but I'm the strategy person. Like, you got to have a strategy. You have to, but people just misunderstand that doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. You have being flexible and not worrying is part of the strategy,
Yeah. Absolutely.
The strategy doesn't mean that I have to do these points. I have to go through these checkpoints. It's my goal is to get to this checkpoint. And if I make it, this is what I'm doing next. If I don't make it, this is what I'm doing,
Right.
And even open other opportunities for coming across open doors. And I think the best way is, balance. So I have a strategy, but I'm open to certain things, and helping you understand what you want to say yes to or no to is really helpful. And that's all part of, and I guess if we're talking about advice, like having no strategy is a strategy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd rather take the road where I have some sort of strategy and I can chuck it, change it, whatever. Yeah. But I'm the strategy person. I like to read Art of War, stuff like that. I think it's great.
Yes. I must crush
but
my
I love
enemies.
to.
That makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To really just and then you can see where you've where you've come and gone. It's like you documenting this stuff, then you're like, oh, this is where I thought I was going to be, and this is where I am now.
Yeah.
It's really fun to do also.
I love that. I love the idea of that, because I think a lot of times people get really wrapped up in well, I have to say yes to everything, and we've even talked about on the show to say yes, and there's a strategy to yeses, it should be something that you're interested in. It should be something that it doesn't even have to be something about. If it's something that piques your interest and something that engages your curiosity, maybe this would be a really interesting thing. Somebody telling me, to go live for 3 months in middle of nowhere, Alabama is kind of, surprising and a little daunting, but if somebody tells you that's for disaster relief, and then you're like, okay, I'm really interested in this and I want to know. And you get to learn a whole lot of things. You get to meet a whole lot of different people. And that's a whole avenue of opportunity that opens up for you from just one word. But if it's like, I want you to camp outside and not talk to anyone, that's a little different, And so I had a job offer one time where they would offer me, it would be basically an on-site position. I would have a team, but I would be basically a contract person, right? So I would be working year to year based on whether or not this contract worked. And it's, was it a good opportunity? I'm sure. But for what I wanted to do and the stability of working to get those contracts is a much better place for me to be. And you learn that stuff as you go through your career. But sometimes you choose security over risk and sometimes you don't.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, for like, if we're equating that to career search or something, you don't have to say yes to everything. You can apply for jobs that you don't want to say yes to. You can go through the interview and be like, oh, these people were weird. I didn't like this, or I didn't like I don't like how they answered their diversity policy questions, that I asked them. Right. And you can have like, I'm going to say yes to this opportunity if it's enough money, or if it's the right circumstance, or if it's remote, or whatever those things are that you want. But if you don't know what those things are, or haven't thought about them, or you're just randomly saying yes to everything,
right?
You may not, I don't know, but you might, I don't know. There's, again, no strategy is a strategy. and you might just, if you want to just see where the universe takes you, I'm sure there's people with examples that have had amazing things happen just from saying yes to the weirdest things.
All right. Yeah, that's totally true. You have to know yourself. Some people love that and some people don't. And, you have to know who you are a little bit.
You'd have to be okay with, well, maybe that didn't work.
Yeah. And maybe restarting, like I say, people talk about like, oh, I'd love to work in the film industry, for example. But like the film industry is a contract business. So it is based on what you're doing right now. And that can come and go in an instant. Say you have a movie and the movie takes 9 months to film. Okay, you have to line up the thing that you're doing, your next thing you're doing before your movie ends. Otherwise, you're making nothing, no dollars. You go from making a ton of money to making nothing. And so there's a lot of whirlwind in it, and that's really hard on people. And they don't realize that. They think, oh, it's great. I'm making props for a movie. But that's not for everybody.
Yeah. But if you love it and you want to take on that risk, then hey, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so we're good at wrapping things up today. That's but I think that's really sound advice. We could probably talk about that again, and I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll bring this back up again at some point. But yeah, let's get to the interview and take a listen.
All right, sounds good. Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Thomas Abdallah, engineer, professor, and author on the show. I met Tom through a group that is forming the New York State chapter of environmental professionals. And I'm excited to announce that Tom is going to be our first chapter president. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's start off there. Let's talk about, why you joined NAEP. How long have you been a member? I think you're pretty new, which is exciting. And how did you hear about it?
Well, I was informed of a colleague, Josh Gillespie from HDR. I have been involved with, numerous over my 37-year career with many conferences, seminars, associations. And I'm also a transportation. So I've been part of Transportation Research Board and American Public Transportation Administration, APTA, SSPC, Greenbuild. I've done a lot of those associations. It's kind of so columns of everything. But what I found with the environmental professionals, the National Association of Environmental Professionals, it's kind of what I've been my career. I am an engineer, college professor, and an author, but I am in reality an environmental professional first and foremost.
Yeah.
So when I learned about it, I started off as an environmental technician. in 1985, right after I graduated from Rutgers University as a chemical engineer. It's interesting, I didn't get a job as a chemical engineer. I got a job as an environmental technician. And thankfully I did, because I have really enjoyed this career as an environmental professional. So when I looked at that in totality, it was kind of like everything. You could be an environmental professional that dealt with hazardous materials and industrial hygiene and NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, and issues with historic and archaeology and sustainability. To me, that was my favorite part. It sort of encompasses all environmental professionals, which, goes back, didn't just start, recently. Environmental professionals have been in business as far as my whole entire career. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I could really reach out to almost all of my colleagues in the industry and in academia. I'm a professor at Columbia University in the Sustainability Management graduate program. So I really liked that aspect of it. And also, I think these associations really help accelerate development for young people. And as they get older, more experienced people. So you get to meet other professionals. And it's sort of something that you can control. We all have a job. We all report to somebody. But these types of associations, this is pro bono work for everybody. So it's kind of, you can put in a little bit, you could put in a lot of it. You could be well involved. You could be on committees. You could be chapter presidents. And so, Josh discussed with us as a group, people in New York State, about forming a New York State chapter, which was interesting because, we think in New York that we've got to be involved with everything. But there wasn't a chapter in New York State. And we have a great state and a great professional. The regulatory agencies are fantastic, and the state is very, progressive. And so it was kind of like, we don't have a chapter. And so we're putting it together.
Awesome. Yeah. We've been kicking the idea around, and I've heard of other people kicking the idea around in New York for a long time. So I think it is surprising to a lot of people that there isn't a chapter in this area and in the region. So it's very exciting that it's actually, happening this time. People are volunteering for the board positions and all that stuff. So we're really excited to see where it goes, and appreciate you stepping in to take the lead as president. So good luck in 2022.
Thank you. I think mostly it's about communication, whether it's on Zoom or in person, or it's really about connecting even through social media platforms. It's really a way to network tremendously. And also it's something near and dear to me. It's an opportunity for me now at this stage of my career that I can mentor and meet young people and meet people in college, graduate school, entry levels, give them an idea about what to expect. I really enjoy your role model way. And I think that's something that I had thought about. I always kind of, in my career, I did these, what I call guest lecturing at colleges and universities.
Yeah.
Professors would contact me, depending on whether they're in an engineering class or a sustainability class, or could you come and talk about what's going on with mass transit and or sustainability. And I was happy to work for, as a sort of a guest at places like my alma mater, Rutgers University, NYU, Columbia University. I did a thing with Harvard. I've entertained students from Cornell. This was kind of something I always did. And then I became a professor at Columbia. So I was able to reach out to, pass along my experiences. Because nothing better than to hear how it's done. And as I was mentioning, it's never one way. Yeah. It's not, there isn't any just, Tom's way or Laura's. It's so many different ways. It's one of the things I thought about as a follow-up to my first book, Sustainable Mass Transit, was to capture the, sustainability professionals, but you're doing it. So I figure I could just be part of that endeavor, because I think it's really important to pass along what we know. No one starts off as as a full-fledged professional when they leave, the college ranks. So we have all been mentored. We have all learned from people. One thing I always tell young and old alike, be a sponge. Learn everything. You can learn from everybody. And I think that's one of the things I often advise my younger and people even my age. Still, I get people I'm going to be 60 next year. So, I still, feel like I'm in the middle of my career. So it's important to network and share knowledge. This is what it's really all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you answered all my questions, so we're done. Just kidding. You have 37 years of experience to talk about, so we have so much more to go. Let's talk, though, about the experience you have at the university, because I know that we want to touch on your interaction with the students and the experience that you're passing on there. So how did you get into that?
Well, I have a sort of a little bit of a motto: do the right thing. Somebody will see it at some point and you'll be rewarded. It may not always be the case. So I just always worked hard. I wrote papers. I did presentations, at all those agencies, the conferences and seminars, I spoke about. I worked for the New York MTA for 35 years. And one of the ways to be able to travel to different cities would be to write about your projects and then present them. Then they would give you the okay to travel to different cities. And in fact, I even traveled to Europe to talk about projects that I was on. So I kind of always did those things. And, out of the blue, I know this is going to sound strange, but out of the blue, I got an email from Columbia University. Would I be interested in being an adjunct professor in the sustainability management program and come for an interview? And the interesting part was I'd always been a fan. Columbia University has many schools, just tremendous amount of schools. I'm still learning it after 8 years. But they had the Earth Institute, and I was a big fan of that. I was a big fan of the idea of worrying about climate change and sustainability management, which would sort of, it's not just hugging trees, which is fabulous, but still is also about practicality and economy. It isn't just it bunches them all together. And I was a really big fan. So I got an email and I was like, I never thought, I thought maybe after I retired from MTA that I would become a professor. But when you're sort of what you're actually looking at comes a call and, you don't wait. And so I interviewed and my, Professor Steve Cohen, who was head of the sustainability management program at Columbia since its beginning, I had always been a fan of his. I read his book. He wrote a book called Sustainable Management. And so I interviewed with him, and it was amazing. I kind of equated, and then they offered me the job, by the way, after telling them. So it's kind of almost like, if you're watching your favorite television program, and then you get a phone call, hey, would you like to appear in Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm?
That's pretty awesome.
Of course I would. So it's kind of like that for me. I got very lucky. And again, I didn't go out and solicit it. I found out I knew numerous colleagues in the program as well already. So it was really great to join that. So it's kind of serendipity. But again, just sort of whatever you do the right thing, do it fully, do it with conviction, don't have any regrets, and just move on. And sometimes somebody influential will be watching and, they'll say, something that you did really well, and then you'll get rewarded from it. So that's what I think happens almost all the time.
Yeah, that's a great example and story. And I think that's a great message for especially emerging professionals. Just there's so many people changing careers too. Just go at it and do your best. And, and I think too, people don't realize how much low hanging fruit there is. There's just so much mediocrity. Like if you can just rise above and do your best, someone will notice. Yeah.
It's kind of cliche, but you can control your own destiny with your effort. You put in your full effort, you will be rewarded. And I think you're absolutely right. In a kind of a weird way, there is a lot of mediocrity, but there's also a lot of people who don't have courage. You also have to have courage, and you have to be able to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go for this. And hey, listen, if it fails, you fail. You just pick up, you get up and just do it, start all over again. So I think also, you just have to have the courage, and the courage to be yourself. One thing, I'm very fortunate. I've had an amazing career. And somewhere, I started off working for somebody and with people, and just as I listened and garnered as much information as I possibly could. And then just out of the blue, all of a sudden, I realized I was becoming a leader. That just kind of sort of popped in. And half of it was me. The other half is there's a lot of people who don't want to be a leader. And so you kind of, half the competition is not even interested. And one of the things that I like to do when I hire people or try to move those people up, try to get people who are a little bit in a shell, come out of the shell. People they don't think they're as smart as they really are. And I realize, I think, from talking to them, there's a lot more going on. And I think you got to give them confidence. And that's one of the things, I got a lot of, and I try to pass that along to whoever is just, be confident. But you have to prepare. I mean, it doesn't come overnight. You have to do your homework. And it's another thing I tell, especially the entry levels that come out of school. School's not over. Getting a degree, doing homework, having, a semester, that might be over. But you're learning, you're schooling, you're training. That's another thing that sort of helped me along when I was younger. I had to do training for staff for issues related to asbestos and lead paint and hazardous waste and that industry. And so I had to kind of learn that so that I could actually help people in our organization. So I did that 3 or 4 years into the job. All of a sudden I was in front of 30 or 40 people. They were all, I was like 28, 29. Everyone was much older than I was. And here I am, telling them how to remove asbestos properly. And, you have to be an expert. When you come in front of a classroom, especially of, older people who aren't as maybe, half of them don't want to be there. And so you really have to learn your craft. You have to be informative. You have to be somewhat entertaining as well, or they're not going to listen to you. So that's another thing I did when I was younger. I sort of took a mantle of a trainer and getting in front of people. And again, this was not in the days of Zoom or anything. This was classroom or conference room settings where you speak to people. So I always, again, another thing that I always mention as a positive thing, get out in front of an audience. And this is the scariest thing for some people. And there's only one way to get over it. And that's to do it. That's to get up in front of a room, get in front of a podium, do your PowerPoints or whatever. But I did that, and it's sort of, then I started doing projects, lead projects, buildings with energy efficiency, solar panels and green roofs. And I started going around, not only in the city, but around the country, just talking about environmental sustainability. Why? Why do we have to do it? I think we've come a long way since I started. It's kind of more of in everyone's DNA now, or we're still trying, but I think it's very important to reduce emissions, reduce greenhouse gases, reduce toxic pollution. That's really where I come from. I come from that end of it. But I morphed into somebody who now worries about when we construct our projects, buildings, make them energy efficient, collecting rainwater, doing all kinds of sustainability things for future, and so that we have less emissions going forward. It's so important. And so I started doing that. And at some point, somebody saw that and must have mentioned to Columbia University, that might be good for being a professor. And I was overjoyed. I joined in 2013. I teach every fall and spring. And another interesting part, I had interviewed with Professor Cohen, and I said, I know this. I know about green roofs. I know about emissions. I know about energy. I know about fossil fuels. He says, well, that's great. But actually what we want you to do is be a professor for the capstone. I was like, okay, well, what's that? And so the capstone is it's sort of a group thesis that students do. And I would be the advisor. I would also, find the right projects. And at Columbia, we capstones, or at least in the sustainability management program, we do capstones for nonprofit or government agencies, organizations that don't have money. And so graduate students, sort of at the tail end of their graduate career, are doing their sort of a group thesis, because I think our thought is, you learn by doing, and you've got to work as a team. Sustainability challenges cannot be solved by one person alone. You need a team of professionals in different disciplines and different organizations and utilities and all that kind of stuff. So nothing is ever a single, one person handles that. So that's why I think it's a great idea to have the students, instead of doing a singular thesis, do a group capstone. And so that's what I've been doing each semester. I generate the projects. I have a network of government agency colleagues and also nonprofits. So the students do pro bono work, And so I've kind of been able to do or be part of projects that have, don't get me wrong, I enjoy mass transit and, MTA and those projects they do with the trains and the buses here in New York City. But then I was able to do work for nonprofits who are advocates for looking to ensure that New York State and our country are looking at goals to reduce greenhouse gases, worrying about climate change. So I've been able to do other projects in other industries, looking at electric cars, looking at sustainability plans for cities, looking at climate adaptation measures. So I got really fortunate that I was also able to now be able to take my craft that I've learned over whatever years at the MTA and then sort of apply it and work with young students to do projects with them. And that's kind of what I do as a professor, which is really great because I didn't know that I would be able to, do the pop quizzes and, term papers. This was kind of like much more for me. And I could actually work with students on actually a real project. When we say real project, we mean it. It's a pro bono work and it's for a client that doesn't have necessary funding to hire an environmental consultant. So it's kind of what I do. So it was really fortunate to be able to branch into, not only from mass transit, but also into other elements that could be helpful for environmental sustainability.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those sound like really great programs. I love what you said about being yourself. I still struggle with that. And I know Nic and I, we invite people to come on this podcast that we think would be great guests. And they're like, oh, I don't know if I have anything to share. They're like, don't do that. You have stuff to share. And then, getting out there and presenting yourself. And you are obviously a great presenter because you tied all of that back together with my original question. Usually by the time I get halfway through, I'm like, what did you ask me? And let's move on, though, to your, you talk about Steve Cohen and meeting an author that you were inspired by, but you, too, are an author now. So let's talk about your book.
So, as I mentioned, I wrote papers about all of my projects. It was a way to get me to go on traveling to different cities. But I actually, wrote papers on projects. And it was kind of in the back of my mind after 30 years of work. I said, I could probably write a book. And I had read that from Professor Cohen's book, Sustainable Management, and I read it in one day.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I actually said, I could do that. But anyway, once again, out of the blue, I get an email from Elsevier Publishing. Now, what happened was I had mentioned I go to all of these, or had gone to all these different conferences. And, definitely if you go into a setting or a committee, you write your name and you become on a friends list, right? So it's even like same thing with the National Association of Environmental Professionals. Not everyone's involved, but if you attend a meeting, you get on a list and you start getting emails and information. But I think the Elsevier, got hold of a list of a friends list that I had been on at Transportation Research Board, and so I got an email. It's absolutely true. They wanted to know if I knew any environmental experts. And I actually wrote back like 30 seconds later, yes, me. And they were. Came back and would you have an idea for a chapter? I said, I have an idea for a whole book. Nice. And it really was kind of coming full circle. One of the things that, obviously I've learned is that mass transit is the most sustainable solution a city can include in its city or town or whatever to reduce greenhouse gases, get people out of single driven cars into multi-passenger vehicles. So we're kind of a sustainable
mental health too.
Yeah. So it's kind of sustainable mass transit. And then what I did for a living was make mass transit. Now, again, I started in mostly in construction projects. I still am actually doing NEPA evaluations and reviewing all of our projects for environmental impacts and mitigating them and eliminating them where we could. And during construction, ensuring noise barriers and all the things that go with environmental mitigations during construction. So that's what I did. So I kind of thought sustainable mass transit, it's kind of like double meaning. Mass transit is sustainable, and what I do make it more sustainable. So I kind of had this idea of writing a book from start to finish, talking about that first part, about it being the benefits of mass transit and kind of what's made New York what New York is. Without the subway system, we wouldn't be what we are today. Half the people in New York City don't even own a car. So they must rely on mass transit in the city. And you can do anything you want. I mean, well, full disclosure, I have a car, but if I really don't need one, if I really didn't want to use it. You could use mass transit. But so I had this idea, and I wanted to include everything that I did, from understanding, if you're going to talk about environmental impacts, you got to know your activity. You got to know your entity. You have to know your system. So I kind of wrote it, I'll start off with, the sort of an introductory first chapter, talk about what mass transit is, talk about what are the impacts of mass transit. Now, mass transit obviously uses a lot of energy, fossil fuels, whether it's diesel fuel for buses or electricity developed by fossil fuels for trains. So there is an energy component, and it's a big part of mass transit, the energy. And also the environmental impacts, of that noise, vibrations, and all kinds of things that wreak havoc on cities, but it also in construction. But then I talk about what are the solutions. So the middle part of the book is about sustainability. It's about including sustainable elements in mass transit projects. And we'll give a big plug here for the mass transit industry, not only in this country, but around the world. Mass transit has, I think, pound for pound over the last 2 decades, reduced their fossil fuel usages from way back to now. Hybrid buses, electric buses, regenerative braking and subway systems that sort of put energy back into the third rail so that you can sort of use it again instead of getting wasted energy. It's all detailed in my book. And then, I started doing some research around the world, in Asia and in Europe, and they're doing all kinds of, amazing things. So I included 20 case studies. Now, some previous books that I had read, they used 2 or 3 case studies. I had so many examples of which to choose from not only in this country, but from around the world. So I said, I'll do 20 mini case studies. And I talk about what they do in California, Los Angeles Metro, Philadelphia, these cities in Chicago and Washington that have, traditional rail systems, and everyone has a bus system. Almost everybody has a bus. In fact, buses are the leading commuters for public transit in the country, are buses. So what I found is an amazing amount of things. And, MTA, New York City Transit, was also part of that, but the whole industry itself was really doing a fantastic thing. So my book is a lot about sustainable mass transit, the why, what we can do to make it more sustainable. It's also, again, it's sort of an homage to the industry about how much over the last 2 decades that we've moved the needle on being more sustainable. And then finally, I kind of wrap it up into an environmental management system approach, which kind of looks at everything. When you do anything, you look at, okay, how's that going to affect the environment? If I'm doing a construction project on one of the stations, or if I'm doing a rehabilitation of a bus depot, what can we do? Okay, well, you know what? We can create rainwater collection. We could put a green roof on it. What can we do to make the project more sustainable? And I have a whole chapter on that. So that's kind of, I had that idea. What I just told you, I wrote that in a scope of work and I sent it to the publisher. A couple of weeks later, they said, well, how long will it take you? Well, I never wrote a book before. So I just sort of a year. And then, okay, so we wrote a scope, a contract, an agreement. And I actually, this is kind of, with a deadline, I never had a deadline like this before. So I actually worked every night, every day, Saturdays, Sundays, whenever I could get some free time, I actually sat and wrote about my, wrote book. I wrote it literally. I wrote it from chapter 1 all the way to the end. But I would go a couple of chapters, and then I'd go back and redo, and then I'd sort of kind of go back and forth. And finally, after 7 months, I had the book done. And it was published in May of 2017. I also, was amazing. I check Amazon. Where is my book? Number 11 this week. Great. I dropped down to number 36. So it kind of comes like something I was really proud of. I had always wanted to do that. I was influenced by it. And it's hard, by the way. It was an achievement and something that, when you do something that's really hard, you're even more proud of it. And I've had, students use my book as the backup for their research papers. And when you have someone call you or email you, hey, I read your book, or I want to use your book as a backdrop to a paper I'm writing, that's priceless. That is something I really enjoy. It makes me feel really great. And every time I get a chance, I try to mention it's a sustain, because ultimately, even though it's a mass transit book, and I am in addition to an environmental professional, I'm a transportation professional. It's a sustainability book. I put everything in there. I talk about wetlands. I talk about coastal issues. I talk about recycling and getting. New York City is the greatest city in the world. We're not the cleanest, and we need to be able to put our waste properly where it's supposed to go, not in the streets because if waste on the street winds up in the river somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like has everything that I ever talked about from an environmental point of view. So it's really a book for environmental professionals. I'll never say a bad word about my publisher because I love them. They picked me up. But it should have been marketed as a sustainability book as opposed to a transportation book. I guess this would be a little quibbling. But I think it's something, and when I mentioned sitting down and maybe writing a second book, I realized I emptied the tank. I put everything into that book. And then again, I think what you're doing, Laura, talking about environmental professionals and differences, and who you have people on this program, and they're all different, and we all have a different path, and we all have a different mentality. And I think that's the one thing I always tell people: you want to be a sustainability professional, you can. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be an architect. You don't have to be an environmental planner. You can be anything, anybody in any profession, anywhere, because everything has an environmental element to it.
Yep.
Mass transit, restaurants, schools, universities, wastewater, everything has an environmental element to it. So no matter if you want to be the one that proposes, or gets sustainability elements in your projects, or build things that are more sustainable for the future, you can do that. You can be in this business. Your background does not have to be engineer or architect or any of the. It's good to have a science background. It's good to have, maybe an understanding of STEM and that background. But again, still, you can even be a carpenter, or you can be a bus driver. We actually have a training for bus drivers, make it more sustainable bus driving. So as soon as you walk into a mass transit, you are a sustainable professional. So this is something that I really admired about what you're doing here is, doesn't really matter what your background is. You can, if your mentality is, you want to save this planet, you want to leave a better planet, then we've got to get this planet to be better for the future. And I think we've been doing that. I think, all my career, and we can do more. And I think one of the ways is to encourage young people that if this is what you want to do, if you want to be a sustainability professional, there are many different pathways there. It isn't just one.
Yeah. That is so true. And there are so many options. Usually when I'm talking to somebody who's trying to change careers, the first thing we talk about is go to your boss or your manager or someone who's doing continuous improvement and ask them if you can start a sustainability committee. Can you start a recycling? Can you just get started in it? Volunteer. Like you said, the trash problem here in Syracuse is horrible. Start there, find a problem and start tackling it, and find other people who want to do it with you.
Yeah. There are numerous amounts of improvements we could make. I'll just give you a couple of, one big example. We had Hurricane Ida came here in New York City and dumped 3 inches of water on us in an hour. It rained the whole day and we were completely flooded. The subway was flooded. Everything was flooded. And the idea was, okay, how can we prevent this? Oh, we got to expand the sewer system. I said, well, why don't we clean it out first? I can honestly say I've never been in a sewer, but I can tell you over my lifetime, they're clogged. And if you do more cleaning, get out the leaves and the plastics and all that kind of stuff first and foremost before you do anything. The same thing with like electrical, the grid. We got to create more renewable energy, which is fantastic. We need to do that. We need to solar and wind and energy storage, but we also have to make our antiquated power transmission system more reliable and more efficient. And a lot of infrastructure is ancient, so we have to fix what we have first. Then we can start expanding, and then we can start adding to that. But the main thing is, first and foremost, what can we do right now? Like you said, a lot of low-hanging fruit that can make our lives much more sustainable.
Yeah. And so I'm going to interject with a question from Nic. So, I failed to mention Nic is not here today, so I'm asking all the questions, but he's allowed a day off. So I've had this conversation with my own mother, telling her that the future of infrastructure for young people is a priority, right? When roads were started being built in the 50s, they weren't really thinking about like, what's the lifespan of this and who's going to fix it later? And so now you're getting to that. A lot of the original infrastructure is crumbling. And she's just like, no, it's fine. The government will take care of it. And I'm like, those are people and your money in the government. And then, so my next question is about the frustration with transportation projects, especially in large metropolitan areas. A lot of the mentality, like my mother probably falls into, is like, it's already bad. So what are you going to do to make it better? We can't make it worse. So why should we spend our money here and all that? Like what do you see as a solution to that, or how do we educate people?
Well, one thing I can say is it can get worse. And I think
Seattle,
being in the infrastructure business and doing, state of good repair projects, what happens is, usually it's sort of something's about to break. Like one of our, I'll use a bridge, for instance. Like, people inspect bridges. There's a crack here. There's a crack there. It's still standing. But what happens is that kind of rolls along on a flat, maybe slightly inclined. And then what happens if it breaks? Boom. Now all of a sudden you have disaster. You have potential safety issues. And you have a bigger problem than you had. And I think we see that everywhere. Especially, if, God forbid, you get really serious demolition issues where, a bridge falls down or something, mudslide or whatever, you have more of a catastrophic thing. Almost always somebody from 5 years ago says, I told them that was going to break. Yeah. So I think, you always have to have a maintenance and activities to ensure a looking ahead. You've got to look ahead 20 years from now. I'm now actually at MTA now almost 35 years. So I've seen projects that I started when I was young. I was involved with the design. I was involved in the construction, had some issues in the maintenance areas. Now I see them need to be rehabilitated over a long period of time. So nothing lasts forever. And you always have to put in a thought process about how are these things going to be maintained. Workforce, that's one of the things, going back to my example of the sewers, the New York City DEP commissioner was in front of this city council like the next day. What happened? He goes, well, listen, I need about $100 billion to fix what I have there. Yeah. But more importantly, I think where people try to save and scrimp, because it's the biggest issue when it comes to infrastructure, it's workforce. You need the people. You need the Department of Sanitation needs people. The transit needs people. You need a workforce, and you need for it to grow. And, to me, there should never be anybody unemployed ever, because there's so many jobs that still need to be done. And I think, again, this is where you get pushback from the bean counters where, if you hire X amount of people, it's going to cost us this, healthcare and that, pension and blah, blah. But that's where really so much, again, go back to the low-hanging fruit. A lot of the things can be solved if you have more staff, if you have more people who are inspections, people more reviewing what's going on. And I think that's a failure. It's not just, it's a workforce. You have to hire the people. You have to train them. Life is all about jobs and careers and stuff like that. This whole idea of mentoring young people, and it's so important to a society, is that, we have a younger generation that is going to have a great work ethic. And I see it. I see at Columbia, I see the students with this great work ethic, people who work for me. And I also can tell who doesn't have a good work ethic. And I try to influence them by, hey, look, here I am working as an engineer, and all of a sudden, people see me on television and they see me on the, I did a little list, if you don't mind me. I was in the Sundance Channel. I was on the Discovery Channel Science Network. I was on a public broadcasting program here, NPR, National Public Radio. I was in an article at Scientific America magazine. I was featured in an Epic Times interview. I was in a short documentary film called Postcards from the Future. I did a podcast for, somebody from Amsterdam. That was really cool, actually. Oh, wow. But they didn't show my face like this one. So this was really my first visual podcast.
Actually, this one doesn't show face either.
Oh, okay. Well, next time. You'll show my picture.
Only if we have some outtakes. We could have an outtake.
Yeah. So, there's an outtake we need to put. It's just recently I was in on the History Channel's Modern Marvels program. And,
so that's one of the things I think we're getting a little bit over our time, so I do want to touch on that. So I'm glad you put that list together. I didn't know about all those other things. That's really cool. And I think I still think also it's good for people to hear, because getting into a career as an environmental professional or an engineer doesn't mean you can't be creative, doesn't mean you can't have some fun, you can still do this stuff. So the Modern Marvels, how did that come about?
Well, same story. I will say this. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I write articles. I promote myself wherever I do a presentation. I talk about on LinkedIn, and they were scouring my profile on LinkedIn. They were looking for a transportation expert from New York City. So I got an email from a producer at Modern Marvels. This was like on a Monday, and they said, we're filming on Friday. Are you free? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then after I hung up, I realized I had like 8 meetings on Friday. So I had to spend the next 2 days rearranging my schedule so that I could actually get there. So I went on a Friday morning. I went a little early. I would always do things early. So I got to the this, and I'm thinking I'm looking for a studio. I'm looking for like someplace where they do filming. And here I am in this like sort of warehouse district. So, but I see the address, and the door was just ajar. So I kind of like, okay, this could be the end, but let's see what's happening. I figured I always wanted to be on this program. So I pushed the door open, and all of a sudden I walk in, and there's lights, there's sound equipment, there's people running around. They're actually filmed in the interview for me in this warehouse, and they set it up with lights, camera, action. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm here an hour early. That's great. Come on, we're ready. And nice. and they talked to me and as a transportation professional, and they asked me a lot of stuff about mass transit. But right the night before, actually, they said, we have a couple other topics, you may be familiar with. Can you talk about? And so one of those topics was about the jeepneys in the Philippines. And the other topic was about the Iditarod race that I was familiar with, but I learned, how we're in the middle of a pandemic here, and they had a pandemic in Alaska, and the only way to get medicine was a 700-mile dog sled relay. And the dog sled relay got medicine to people and saved, a lot of people's lives.
Oh, wow.
And then another topic was about the hovercraft that goes over the Solent between the Isle of Wight, England. So they kind of gave me those topics the night before, and it was kind of like going back to college. Okay, I have to study. And I read up about all those 3 issues. So the next day, they asked me questions, and about a couple of weeks later, the episode came out. The only 3 they used were those 3. And they didn't use anything I talked about with mass transit, and so the episode is called Moving America. It was about the trucking industry, but they have little individual, educational vignettes. And so I talked about those 3 things in about 2 minutes. But it was really cool, and the program was hosted by Adam Richman, who I love from Man vs. Food, from the Food Network. We never met each other because we sort of filmed different times, yeah. But it was really exciting. And these are the types of things that, this is what working hard and doing the best you can will lead to, and being yourself and just being passionate, enjoying what you do. I feel horrible, sorry, that's my daughter.
That's okay.
But I really feel bad that, I get on the train in the morning and go to work, and I see these sad faces, and I feel bad for them because I really enjoy getting up and going to work and accomplishing things. Great. And I think that's what I always also like to pass along is, got to find a career that you enjoy, because, once you do that, that's gold. And those are the things that I was very fortunate that I've been able to have different careers and being able to talk to different people and be out there and mentor. And by the way, as you said, have fun. And I think that's the name of the game. You have to have enjoyment with what you do. And if you do what you enjoy, boy, that's priceless.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to end today. It's very inspiring to hear from someone who loves what they do so much. It does such a great job at it. So, Nic and I are still waiting for someone to check out us and give us an opportunity to come on TV. So I'll let you know when that happens.
Well, listen, you know what? I would bet that it will happen, because you just, like I said, I've admired what you've been doing since I met you last year. Well, this year, tomorrow it'll be last year.
Right.
Oh, sorry. We're sort of doing this on New Year's Eve. But no, I really, I think what you guys do is great, and so blessed and thankful for being part of it. And you keep doing what you're doing, and it'll turn out right. And it has already, I'm sure. So right. Just do the right thing, and good things will happen.
Yeah. Every one of these connections, even connecting with you, is a great celebration. So where can people get in touch with you? Okay. So you can catch me on LinkedIn for sure, Thomas Abdallah, but also you can email me, Thomas, THOMAS.Abdallah, ABDALLAH at MTA
ENVCD.org. And you can email me and I will respond. Absolutely enjoy, discussing, work that I do with MTA, with Columbia, and all kinds of sustainability. That's my phone. Sorry.
Someone's calling already. Huh?
Yeah, really. That was quick. So, you catch me. But also, I don't do any other social media. The LinkedIn is the one. It's professional. It's where I connect with a lot of professionals. A lot of students get in touch with me there. So that's a great place.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. This has been really fantastic, and I look forward to working with you in the New York State chapter.
Thank you very much.
That's our show. Thank you, Tom, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.